Good morning and Happy New Year. We're delighted to have you starting 2024 with us as we connect the dots with Dr. Food. As always, I am Mickey French. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Food Integrity. We have a lot going on this year, so keep an eye on our social channels and our website. We have so many activities this year focused again on transparency for building trust in the food industry for both members and non-members. Um, we have with us again, as always, beginning our fourth year, I can't believe that, of this series, is one of the UK's premier food experts, Dr. David Hughes, also known as Dr. Food. He joins us each month to share insights for the entire food chain on what's happening around the world, based on his decades of experience and his current travels. And he joins us today from the illustrious Oxford University. So happy New Year, David.
And thanks and Happy New Year to you. Even as we in the UK float further away east from you, it's been an extraordinarily wet festive season in a biblical rain, for goodness sake. So, for example, on New Year's Eve, the Eurostar train, which is very popular, which goes between London and Paris under the sea, it was all the trains were cancelled due to floods in the channel. And look, I know you have your tornado alley states in the Midwest, but for goodness sake, in Manchester, we had a tornado taking roofs off buildings, which is extraordinarily unusual. Uh, Long faces for us in the UK because of bad weather? Well, no. We all had a jolly good time with shameless eating and drinking to celebrate the holidays.
Fantastic. Well, we did the same on this side of the ocean as well. So now it's back to some more fruits and vegetables on my side, I think. Um, we're happy to be live this morning. So just a reminder, if you put some questions in the chat, we'll save a few minutes at the end to answer some of your questions. So let's start today's session by reflecting for a moment on last year, on the year that was. Who are the winners and losers, particularly, David, in the UK retail market?
Yeah, right. Okay. Who did best? Well, 2023, it was a bonanza year for supermarket private label, who stripped market share from the branded guys. They're up 3% in volume and value. And remember, private label now is 60% of total groceries in most supermarkets, in mainline supermarkets. Remember, you're much lower. You're about 20%, for goodness sake. And even further, if we take the hard discounters in the UK, Aldi, which you have, and Lidl, they're operating at 80% plus private label, and they're growing the fastest. So, the question is, did the big brands suffer? A little bit, but they were huge on promotions, and retailers just couldn't refuse the big discounts of the brands. So, it suggests that the middle of the market was squeezed, as was. Incidentally, also big FMCG used, I don't know if you use the same phrase in the USA, shrinkflation too. So they didn't up prices necessarily, but they reduced the size of their candy bars, etc.
Hmm.
A depressing fact is that those that did best were those involved in vaping. So the most successful grocery category was vaping. It doubled to well over $2 billion as smokers just abandoned tobacco in droves, for goodness sake. Why, you might ask? Is it better for the consumer's health? Well, actually, it's more about price pressure. Look, a 20 pack of, say, Marlboro cigarettes is close to $20 in double the US price in the UK. And half that $20, so $10 close to it, is the cost of UK tobacco tax and value added tax. And remember, too, we've got new UK legislation coming up during this year that will make it illegal for anyone born after the start of 2009 to buy any cigarettes at all. So the tobacco guys are getting hit hard. What about the vapors? Well, vaping regulation is coming too. I think a bit like with you on packaging, flavors, and displays. Who else did well on fresh foods, for example? There was only one winner in the meat case, and that was chicken. I think that's the same as in the USA. They saw growth in volume and value as beef struggled and lamb was really hit particularly hard. during this sort of cost of living crisis, if you will. And sadly, for my mind, fresh fruit and veg went backwards as consumers, households saw their budgets squeezed. And this is right across Europe. There's like a drop in consumption of close to 10%.
Wow.
And what sort of intrigues me is that there's a perception that fruit and veg, fresh fruit and veg, are expensive. Yet, they aren't really.
Not all of them. No, right.
No, exactly. So you could say that 2023, it was a right royal fistfight between traditional supermarkets and the hard discounters, with the hard discounters coming off better. But suppliers were squeezed. And I mean, a good example, or a bad example perhaps, of this is that Amazon UK had showed little or no Christmas spirit as they told their suppliers to pay up substantial lump sums to prop up Amazon profitability or be delisted. And they gave them 48 hours to do so. And there may be consequences to this, because what they're doing is violating. We have a grocery supply code of conduct in the UK, which is a government regulatory agency. And Amazon will get more than just a knuckle rap for this move from the code of conduct regulator. But also, just finishing on these nuggets, that this last year, we saw EU trends washing into the UK. So government regulation of imported food and other commodities as it relates to deforestation in home countries where they were produced. So if you think beef, soy, cocoa, amongst other commodities, now those exporting into the EU must prove that their products are deforestation free with substantial, detailed, full sort of evidence declarations, etc., which adds cost and effort. And sellers must prove their products are. So, the EU countries are linking imported product metrics on the environment and on animal welfare, and you've got to be the same as the levels that are mandatory within the EU. I mean, you might say, well, so what? Well, exporters into the EU now will have to match the strict rules in their own country to get a ticket to enter EU markets. And so, essentially, it's green barriers are going up. They're getting higher and higher. And I think you'll see that for the long term.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we're seeing a lot of that directionally here, but certainly not as high of regulatory hurdles to hurdle over here.
Yeah, we're good at regulation. Dear Lord.
Yeah, exactly. So as I said, you're at the Oxford Food Conference this week. Tell us what's top of mind and sort of where the tensions are in the audience that you'll be seeing this week.
Right. Actually, it's the Oxford Farming Conference, and I'm right in it now, actually. And this evening, I'll be going to the gala dinner at Christ Church College, which is part of the University of Oxford. And that was founded by King Henry VIII, the one who had many wives and didn't treat them well, back in 1548. So it's a pretty old building. And out of interest, our president, King Charles III, is a great 15 times nephew of Henry VIII, just by the by. There we go. And the conference is sort of focused on worrisome topics resulting from the combined impact of the pandemic, of the Ukraine war, extreme climate change and events, etc. And the focus is particularly on national and individual household food security. I think it's a big issue in the US too, but in the UK in 2023, last year, 15% of our total population were food insecure. I mean, that's sort of shocking, really, for a so-called higher income country. And as you'll know, charity food banks, they're flat out. They can't sort of cope at the moment. And the big discussion around in the UK is, are we producing enough food? Should we produce more? So, for example, we're 60% self-sufficient in food, which it depends, is that high or low? Well, I'll come back to that. Whereas you're 80% self-sufficient. And what worries some people is that empty grocery shelves last year focused the attention on the question, should we increase our own food production? And the farm lobby, no surprise here, says yes. Yet other groups say, well, but at what cost? And attendees here, I'll get a lot of this evening, have polarized views. I mean, one end, the farm end, if you will, they'll be saying, let's expand domestic food production and restrict imports. And the other end says that the UK should farm in a much, much less intensive manner, improving biodiversity, focusing on wildlife management, using less herbicides and fertilizer. But I'm so slightly concerned. I mean, I take both sides, but the UK has to be really careful, or it'll end up like a sort of Disney theme park for agriculture. Tiny fields which aren't good for big machines, cute hedgerows, and well-shampooed sheep. I was intrigued this morning where a very senior official from our Department of Agriculture was announcing some new sustainable agricultural financial incentives for farmers. And for example, just to show at what level of detail they get into, he said there's a $400 acre for establishing nesting plots for lapwings. Can you imagine?
Wow.
So the bird lapwing, but $400 an acre if you put in nesting plots. I mean, God love him. But on self-sufficiency in food, historically we've boomeranged from 100% self-sufficient back in the 1800s to less than to 35% actually in the 1930s, when the view was that it was the colonies' job to produce food, like
Right.
Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa, and that we produce coal, iron ore, and machine goods for export. Actually, tomorrow morning, I'm on the podium with the president of the National UK Farmers Union, talking about how farming communities should be more influential in guiding farm policy. I mean, it's a worry that the farmers' voice is crowded out by better resource groups like big food and activists, environmental activists, as well as international organizations like the UN. And I think actually we often forget who should know the most about producing food ingredients. And you think, wouldn't that sort of naturally be the farmer? Yet in the UK, farmers are not as organized or as well resourced as other players. And historically, they've tended to keep a low profile when it suited them and only shouting out when they were in trouble. And instead they should have been like maintaining a consistently positive profile with consumers and government. But I think the real message I hope is going to come out tomorrow is that what's clear to me that as we face sort of this existential economic and climate crisis, that the food industry from farmer all the way through to consumer need to work together for a more secure and sustainable future. I mean, it just makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole point of CFI, right? Is bringing us all together as a food system.
Exactly.
So to end with New Year's resolutions, what will you do more or less of in 2024, David?
Well, right. Look, I'm not one for making rash New Year's resolutions that I promptly abandon by mid-January. But I've got one for 2024 that I'm just bound and determined to follow through on. And what is it? I'm going to visit Italy more. So there. I mean, why? Why? For a number of reasons. I mean, the first is long-suffering Susan, my wife of 54 years, loves Italy. And why? Because she loves the language. She finds it sort of romantic, goes weak at the knees when she hears Italians speak. So that's a big tick. And then secondly, I love this country because it's passionate about food and meal eating, and they've got sort of tongue-tingling diversity of food and the way that they present it. It's so brilliant. And I think, Italians have such a wonderful commonsensical approach to food. And then surely there must be lessons we can learn. So, for example, in Italy, you must sit down to eat. You don't eat food on the hoof, for goodness sake. It's considered to be atrociously rude to do that. That's what And another EG would be if you're eating out in a restaurant, there's no salt and pepper on the table. And if you want salt and pepper, you've got to ask for it to be brought to you. And then if you do so, you run the risk of getting the chef offside because you're suggesting that he or she doesn't know how to produce food and to make it tasty for you. So, beware. And then just look at like body size. Sorry to mention it, but Italian obesity rates are one third of the UK and the US, which always astonishes me. I mean, I think it's because they just take food more seriously. And look, Brits and Brits and the US are at the top of the league on the sort of morbid consumption of ultra-processed foods. I mean, shockingly, for our two countries, it's 57% of our total food consumption is defined as ultra-processed foods. And the number for Italy is 18%. And so I think it just shows Italy has just a better relationship with food. Mind you, sometimes they're over the top. They've just banned cell-based meat as they see it. It's an assault on their own meat culture. So all in all, I'm off to Italy in 2024 for a whole series of memorable food experiences. And what's more, for us, lucky us, we can sort of pop over for the weekend, and the cost is sort of tuppence. So what do I say? Let's see if I can get it right. Italia Storevendo. Storevando, I think would be better. And what's it? Italy, here I come. No, I'm going to be there more often in 2024, Mick.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, one of my resolutions is to move more, and part of that is not just getting a standing desk, but also getting on more airplanes. So it costs a bit more than tuppence for me to get there, but we'll get there. With that, we have nothing in the Q&A except a nice thank you from David Wyman. So I will just say Happy New Year to all of us. Please keep an eye on foodintegrity.org. Well, we hope you'll join us in February and all year long. And we've got all kinds of programming stuff coming up in the new year. So keep an eye on our social channels or check in with me directly. So David, Happy New Year. Good luck at dinner tonight. Have a nice evening.
And thank you, and Happy New Year to you all. And thanks as ever, Mickey and Susan. Thanks very much. Talk to you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye now.